My sister-in-law, Jessica, stood over the pile of ruined toys, my 5-year-old son's birthday haul, with a smirk that could cut glass. She had just accidentally stepped on the vintage robot I'd spent 6 months saving for and then, claiming she was checking for sharp edges, snapped the wings off his new drone. My husband did nothing. My brother, her husband, chuckled nervously, sipping his beer. I felt my blood turning into magma. I was about to scream, to flip the table, to burn the whole house down. But then, the room went silent. Not because of me, but because my father, a man who hadn't raised his voice since 1998, slowly stood up. He didn't look at the toys. He looked at Jessica. Then, with a terrifying calmness, he slid his gold wedding band off his finger, the one my late mother gave him, and placed it on the mahogany table with a heavy clack. He looked her dead in the eye and said 4 words. Just 4. And those words didn't just end the party. They incinerated the entire family dynamic we had built for a decade. But to understand why those 4 words were so nuclear, you have to understand that this wasn't just about a few broken toys. This was the final explosion of a bomb that had been ticking for 5 years. Let's rewind a bit. You need to know the players in this mess to understand why nobody stopped her. First, there's me, Sarah. I'm the peacemaker, the one who swallows her pride to keep Sunday dinner civil. Then there's my brother, Mark. Mark used to be my best friend, but ever since he married Jessica, he's become a shadow. A nervous, trembling shadow who apologizes for his own existence. And then there is Jessica. Jessica is one of those people who is painfully beautiful on the outside but rotted on the inside. You know the type. She posts inspirational quotes about kindness on Instagram while making waitresses cry in real life. She's the queen of the backhanded compliment. She'll say things like, "Oh, Sarah, I love how you're just comfortable wearing anything," while looking at my outfit like it's a trash bag. But the real power dynamic in our family centered around my dad. My dad is a retired surgeon. He's stoic, quiet, and wealthy. After my mom passed away 3 years ago, Dad became distant. He let Jessica run the show. They lived in his massive estate, the house I grew up in rent-free. Jessica called it keeping Grandpa company, but we all knew it was because Mark couldn't afford the lifestyle Jessica demanded. So, they lived in the mansion, drove Dad's cars, and threw parties on Dad's credit card. I lived in a modest apartment across town with my husband and my son, Leo. And for years, I watched Jessica treat my father like a live-in ATM and a nuisance in his own home. But Dad? He took it. He just wanted family around. He wore that wedding ring as a symbol of the promise he made to my mom. Keep the family together no matter what. That promise was the only reason Jessica was still standing. Until Leo's 5th birthday. The drama started 2 weeks before the party. I wanted to host it at a local park. Simple. Pizza, cake, kids running around. But Jessica insisted on hosting it at the estate. She called me up, voice dripping with that fake sweetness. "Sarah, honestly, a park? It's going to rain. Just have it here. The pool is open. Dad wants it here." I knew that was a lie. Dad hates noise. But I agreed because I didn't want to fight. That was my mistake. I handed her the reins. When we arrived on the day of the party, it didn't look like a 5-year-old's birthday. It looked like a minimalist cocktail mixer for influencers. Everything was beige. The balloons were beige. The cake was a weird, sugar-free, gluten-free, joy-free sculpture that looked like a block of concrete. There were no superheroes. No cartoons. Just beige. "Where are the decorations I sent over?" I asked, holding Leo's hand. He looked small and confused in the massive foyer. Jessica floated down the stairs, glass of wine in hand at 11 a.m. "Oh, sweetie, those were so tacky. I donated them. We're going for a sophisticated, organic vibe." I felt the first spike of rage. She donated my son's Spider-Man decorations? But I looked at Mark. He gave me a pleading look that said, "Please don't start a scene." So I swallowed it. For Leo, the party was a disaster. Jessica had invited her friends, none of whom had kids. Leo was sitting in the corner playing with a stick he found outside because Jessica wouldn't let him touch the decor. But the real tension started when it was time for gifts. We gathered in the living room. This was the moment I had been waiting for. We didn't have a lot of money, but for this birthday, my husband and I had scraped together everything to buy Leo this incredible, vintage-style electric train set and a really cool, high-end remote-controlled robot. It was the kind of toy I knew he would keep forever. Leo opened it, and his face lit up. It was pure magic. That smile was worth all the beige balloons in the world. He started setting up the robot on the coffee table. That's when Jessica walked over. "Is that plastic?" she asked, her nose scrunching up. "It looks so cheap. Are you sure it's safe?" "It smells like toxic chemicals." "It's high-grade PVC, Jessica." "It's fine," I said, my voice tight. "I don't know," she said, swirling her wine. "Mark, doesn't it look dangerous? The edges." She reached out. "Let me see." "No, he's playing with it," I said, stepping forward. "Relax, Sarah. I'm just looking." She snatched the robot from Leo's hands. Leo whimpered. She turned the robot over in her hands, tapping it aggressively with her long, acrylic nails. "It feels so flimsy," she said loudly, making sure her friends could hear. "I mean, I guess it's fine for a budget gift, but—" And then she did it. She pretended to stumble. It was a theatrical, poorly acted stumble where she barely moved her feet, but threw her upper body forward. She dropped the robot. It hit the hardwood floor with a sickening crunch. An arm snapped off. The battery casing shattered.
"Oops," she said.
No emotion. No gasp. Just a flat oops. Leo started to cry. A high, keen wail of heartbreak. I rushed to pick it up. It was broken beyond repair. "Well," Jessica sighed, looking bored. "That proves my point. It was cheap junk. If it breaks that easily, you really shouldn't have bought it, Sarah. You essentially bought him trash." And then she laughed. A short, cruel chuckle. "Mark, get the broom." Sarah brought garbage into the house again. That was the moment. The laughter. Her friends giggled politely. Mark looked at the floor, rushing to get a broom to sweep away my son's happiness. I stood up, shaking. "You did that on purpose." "Don't be hysterical," Jessica snapped, her mask slipping. "I did you a favor. Now you can buy him something wooden. Something tasteful." I looked at my dad. He was sitting in his leather armchair in the corner. He had been watching the whole thing. Usually, he would just look away. Usually, he would turn up the TV. But today, he was staring at the broken robot pieces on the floor. Then he looked at Leo, crying in my husband's arms. Then he looked at Jessica, who was now pouring herself another drink, acting like nothing happened. Dad stood up. The room went quiet because Dad never stood up during social gatherings. He usually vanished into his study. He walked over to the coffee table. He looked tired. He looked old. But his eyes were blazing with a cold fire I had never seen before. He looked at Jessica. "You think this is funny?" His voice was barely a whisper. Jessica rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Dad. Don't start. It was an accident. Sarah is just being dramatic because she's embarrassed she bought a cheap toy."
Dad didn't blink.
He reached for his left hand. He twisted the gold band on his ring finger. My heart stopped. He had never taken that ring off. Not when he operated. Not when he slept. Mom put that on his finger 30 years ago. He slid it off. The skin underneath was pale, an indent where the gold had rested for decades. He placed the ring on the table. "Your mother made me promise," Dad said, his voice gaining volume. "She made me promise to be patient.
To keep the peace.
To let you all live here, because family supports family." He looked at Mark. "I let you stay here, because I thought you were saving money to build a life. I let her," he pointed at Jessica, "redecorate my house, drive my cars, and spend my retirement because I promised your mother I wouldn't let you fail." Jessica scoffed. "Dad, you're making a scene. Put the ring back on. You're acting senile." "Senile?" Dad smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm clear-headed for the first time in 5 years." He took a step toward Jessica. The air in the room was so thick you could choke on it. "You broke my grandson's heart today," Dad said. "But you've been breaking this family for years. I watched you isolate Mark. I watched you talk down to Sarah. I watched you treat me like a guest in my own home. But I tolerated it. For her. He gestured to the empty space beside him, implying Mom. But the ring is off now. The promise is fulfilled. I tried. Okay, we get it. Jessica snapped, looking nervous now. I'll buy the kid a new toy. How much was it? $50? Mark, give him $50. Dad raised a hand. Keep your money. And then he said the 4 words. He looked at Mark and Jessica, took a deep breath, and delivered the sentence that changed our lives forever. I am selling everything. Jessica froze. What? The house, Dad said, gesturing to the walls around us. The cars. The cabin. The stocks. Everything. I called the realtor this morning. I wasn't sure I was going to go through with it until I saw you laugh at a crying child. You can't sell the house, Jessica stammered, her face losing all color. We live here. Not anymore, Dad said. I'm selling it all. I'm moving into a condo downtown. A small one. 1 bedroom. No guest room. But where will we go? Mark whispered, finally speaking up. You have jobs, Dad said coldly. Figure it out. But Dad, Jessica screamed, the sophisticated facade completely gone. You can't do this. This is our home. We have rights. We've lived here for 5 years. You are guests, Dad corrected. Ungrateful guests. And eviction starts now. You have 30 days. 30 days. Jessica shrieked. We can't find a place in 30 days. Not with our stand. She stopped herself. She was about to say standards. Not with your credit? Dad finished for her. I know about the credit cards, Jessica. I know you maxed out the emergency card I gave Mark. The room gasped. I didn't even know that. Mark looked at his shoes. I am cutting you off, Dad continued, his voice like iron. No inheritance. No allowance. No free rent. The money from the sale of this house is going into a trust for Leo's education and my travels. I'm going to see the world like your mother wanted. Without you. Jessica looked at Mark. Do something. He's crazy. Mark looked at his father. Then he looked at his wife. He saw the woman who had just bullied a 5-year-old and was now screaming about her inheritance. No, Mark said softly. Excuse me? Jessica hissed. He's right, Mark said, tears welling in his eyes.
He's right, Jess.
You're mean. You're just mean. Jessica looked like she had been slapped. She grabbed her purse. I am leaving. I am not staying here to be insulted by a senile old man and a loser husband. She stormed out. We heard her car peel out of the driveway. Silence returned to the living room. The guests awkwardly shuffled out, leaving just me, my husband, Leo, Mark, and Dad. Dad picked up the broken robot. He looked at Leo, whose tears had dried up in the shock of the moment. I'm sorry, Leo, Dad said gently. Grandpa is going to buy you a better one. A metal one. One that doesn't break. Then he looked at me. Sarah, I'm sorry I waited so long. I thought keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. I was wrong. He picked up his wedding ring and put it back on. She would have hated that woman anyway, he muttered, half to himself. The aftermath was chaotic, but in the best way possible. Dad wasn't bluffing. The for sale sign went up 3 days later. It was the fastest market listing I've ever seen. Mark didn't go with Jessica. When she came back that night, expecting him to grovel, he had packed his bags. He moved into a small apartment near me. It turned out, without Jessica's demand for luxury clothes and organic beige decor, Mark was actually capable of saving money. He filed for divorce a month later. It was messy. She tried to come after half of Dad's money, arguing she had invested sweat equity into the house, but Dad's lawyers were sharks. She got nothing but her own debt. As for the house, it sold for fortune. Dad bought a sleek, modern condo in the city, right near a park. He spent his weekends with Leo. They build complex Lego sets together. But here is the real kicker, the final twist I didn't see coming. When Dad was clearing out the attic of the old house, preparing for the move, he found a box. It was hidden behind some insulation. It was Mark's old box from high school. But inside, underneath some old yearbooks, was a stack of letters. They were from Jessica, from before she met Mark. It turns out, Jessica hadn't met Mark by accident at a coffee shop like she always claimed. The letters were drafts.
Plans.
She had targeted Mark. She knew who his father was. She knew about the estate. One letter was a literal checklist. Target, Mark.
Goal. The house.
Timeline, 2 years to marriage. She was a gold digger in the most literal, premeditated sense. We showed Mark the letters. I thought it would destroy him. I thought he would crumble knowing his entire marriage was a scam. But he didn't. He read them, sat in silence for a moment, and then started laughing. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a laugh of relief. I always thought I wasn't good enough for her, Mark said, wiping his eyes. I thought I was lucky she chose me.
But she didn't choose me.
She chose the real estate. You're free, son, Dad said, patting him on the back. Dad took us all on a vacation to Italy with a portion of the house money that summer. We sat on a terrace in Tuscany, drinking wine, real wine, not the sour stuff Jessica liked. Leo was playing with a metal airplane Dad had bought him at a local market. I looked at my dad. He looked 10 years younger. The weight of that big, empty house was gone. The weight of Jessica was gone. You know, Dad said, looking at the sunset. I love that house. Your mother and I built a life there. Do you regret selling it? I asked. Not for a second, he said. He twisted his ring. A house is just wood and brick. It can rot.
But family?
Family is the foundation. And sometimes, to save the foundation, you have to tear down the rotten parts. He looked at Leo, then at Mark, then at me. I should have said those 4 words years ago, he smiled. I'm glad you said them when you did, I replied. The best part? A few months later, I ran into Jessica. She was working at a boutique in the mall. She looked normal. No designer clothes. No sneer. She tried to hide when she saw me, but I caught her eye. I didn't say anything mean. I didn't cause a scene. I just smiled, held up my shopping bag, filled with gifts for Leo, and walked past her. She had tried to break my son's joy to exert power. Instead, she shattered her own life. And all it took was a broken toy and a father who finally decided that enough was enough. So, if you are dealing with a toxic family member, someone who breaks your things, your spirit, or your peace, and you are waiting for the right moment to stand up, don't wait until they break something you can't replace. Take off the ring of obligation. Say the words. Sell the house. Cut them off. Because the peace you find on the other side, it's priceless.